AITA for divorcing my husband after my family tried setting him up with my best friend after my miscarriage, and he agreed. Hey Reddit, throw away because this is messy. Buckle up. I 32F have been married to my husband 34M for 6 years. I thought we had a solid marriage, a partnership built on trust, love, and understanding. He was the kind of man I believed I could count on no matter what, through thick and thin, through life's inevitable ups and downs. In fact, I used to brag about how lucky I was to have someone who supported me, who valued me, and who made me feel secure in our relationship. But as it turns out, I was wrong, terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. What I thought was a rock-solid foundation was actually just a house of cards waiting for the right gust of wind to topple it. What followed was a chain of events so outrageous and filled with betrayal that it left me questioning everything I thought I knew, not just about my marriage, but about the people closest to me. This story isn't just about a husband who broke my trust. It's about the shocking audacity of the very people I once called my support system. The people who were supposed to have my back, who were supposed to uplift me when life got tough. Instead, they revealed just how little they valued me and just how much they underestimated me. And amidst all of this, there was one more twist. One secret that I had quietly carried for years, never feeling the need to share it, never thinking it mattered until now. A secret that ultimately turned everything they thought they knew about me on its head. A few months ago, I had a miscarriage. It was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, both physically and emotionally. I was shattered, grieving the loss of a child I never got to meet, and struggling to process what had happened. The emotional toll was overwhelming, and I thought the one thing I could count on during this heartbreaking time was the support of my husband. But instead of comfort, instead of empathy, I was met with something I never expected. Blame. Yes, blame. Not from a stranger, not from some distant acquaintance, but from the person I loved, the person I trusted to stand by me through thick and thin. My husband, along with my family, implied that my stressful lifestyle was the reason I lost the baby. They pointed to everything that supposedly stressed me out. And when I say stressful lifestyle, what they meant was being a housewife. It wasn't enough to be grieving, apparently. The fact that I wasn't slaving away at a 9-to-5 office job or juggling multiple high-powered careers meant that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't being productive enough. My mom, for instance, kept commenting on how I didn't have a real job, which, according to her, must have been why I couldn't handle the emotional strain of a pregnancy. It was as if I was some delicate flower who couldn't handle the weight of reality, because I was just a housewife. And then there was my husband, who had the audacity to say that maybe if you had more to focus on other than just cleaning and cooking, you'd have been more prepared for the stress of pregnancy. He couldn't even look me in the eye when he said it. He just muttered it under his breath, as though blaming me was somehow easier than offering support. But it wasn't just them. My sister kept calling to ask when I was going to get back to normal, suggesting that I needed to take better care of myself, as though I hadn't already been emotionally gutted. There was this constant pressure from them, like my grief wasn't allowed to have its time. They acted as though I was supposed to snap out of it and get back to being the cheerful, upbeat housewife they knew. My aunt even said, you know, if you were working, you wouldn't be so obsessed with your feelings all the time. The worst part was the guilt they made me feel. I felt like I wasn't allowed to grieve properly. I wasn't allowed to feel because my lifestyle wasn't strenuous enough to merit the emotional chaos I was experiencing. I couldn't just mourn. I had to be functional, had to be better. Instead of comfort, I got comments that felt like knives. Instead of finding peace in my grief, I found constant demands. When are you going to get back to normal? What's next for you? You should be looking after your health. But looking after my health, my emotional well-being, meant grieving, and no one was willing to give me that space. Let me explain. On the surface, I'm a stay-at-home wife. I don't flaunt what I do, so to my husband and my family, I've just been a measly housewife for years. It's never been an issue for me. I've always felt comfortable in my role, and I've genuinely enjoyed taking care of our home and supporting my husband. But what they don't know is that I run a six-figure e-commerce business from home. I've been doing it quietly for several years, building it up without much fanfare. It's not that I wanted to hide it, but it was never really a conversation I needed to have. My income went into our savings, funded vacations, paid off bills, and provided us with a cushion for any emergencies. I didn't feel the need to brag about it or make it a defining part of my identity. But apparently, my relaxed, easy life was to blame for the miscarriage. Because, according to my husband and my mom, I was too fragile to carry a child. They couldn't fathom how I could have a full-fledged, successful business running in the background while also maintaining a home and being a supportive wife. To them, I was just sitting around the house, doing nothing. They couldn't reconcile that someone who didn't punch a time clock or have a real job could still be so driven, so successful. It was easier for them to believe that I was too fragile to handle the responsibility of pregnancy, rather than accept the real emotional complexities that come with it. In fact, my husband and my mom took it a step further and actually suggested that my work-from-home business might be why I was stressed and unable to carry the pregnancy. They kept insinuating that I didn't have the strength to deal with the physical and emotional stress of a child. As if managing a business, making important decisions, and juggling the logistics of a household wasn't stressful. They made it sound like I wasn't contributing enough, like my work didn't matter. At first, I tried to brush it off. I figured maybe they were just saying things in the heat of the moment. But when they kept pushing this narrative, I realized how deeply ingrained their dismissive attitude toward my career and role as a wife really was. They couldn't understand that my life wasn't easy just because I didn't clock in somewhere every day. As if the blame for the miscarriage wasn't enough, the insinuations started getting personal. My husband, who had never shown even a hint of doubt about my ability to handle our lives together, started echoing my family's remarks. "Maybe you just need a change of pace," he said one night. "You've been working so hard, maybe it's too much." It was like a punch in the gut. He was supposed to be the one person who understood me, who knew how hard I worked, how much I cared for our life together. And yet, there he was, questioning whether I was capable of being a mother, simply because I didn't fit their narrow view of what it meant to be a real woman. The life I had built for myself was suddenly deemed insufficient by the very people I trusted most. It gets worse. At a time when I needed my husband the most, when I was grieving, he wasn't there. It wasn't just the emotional absence that stung. It was the fact that he was physically absent. He wasn't just distant, he was actively engaged in an affair. Yes, my husband, the man I thought I could rely on, was cheating on me while I was dealing with the most painful loss of my life. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I had suspected something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. It wasn't until I found the text his phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter that I put the pieces together. The messages were loving, flirtatious, filled with promises he'd never made to me. It was as if I was reading a script of everything I'd been longing to hear while I was sitting at home, heartbroken and alone. The worst part was that he didn't even try to hide it. And as if that wasn't enough, my family knew. They knew about the affair, and instead of rallying behind me, offering any semblance of support, they were suggesting no, encouraging my best friend to take my place. My mom, in a quiet, almost casual tone, told me that maybe it was time for a change. "You've been through so much," she said. "Perhaps it's time to let someone else take over for a while." She wasn't talking about my grief. She was talking about my role as a wife. And then it got even more twisted. My sister, as if it were a business deal, asked if I had considered letting my best friend step in. "She's always admired your husband," my sister said, matter-of-factly. "Maybe she'd be a good fit for him. She'd take care of him better than you could right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family suggesting that my best friend should step into my shoes as if I were some disposable object that could be easily replaced. They thought I was too fragile, too weak to carry the role of wife, to hold on to my marriage after the loss I'd suffered. Meanwhile, my husband, the one person who should have been standing by me, was out playing house with someone else. It was as though everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for our life together, didn't matter. And my family, they didn't even bat an eye at the fact that I was being betrayed. Instead of offering empathy, they were already looking for someone to take my place. It was like a sick joke. Everyone around me, including the one person I should have been able to trust the most, deciding I wasn't worth the effort anymore. And in the face of all that, my so-called relaxed, easy life was somehow still being blamed for everything that had gone wrong. It took everything in me not to completely lose my composure. I stood there, trying to process the utter absurdity of it all. My husband was having an affair, my family was suggesting my best friend replace me, and I was expected to simply accept it, like some sort of tragedy that could just be swept under the rug. But as much as the anger and betrayal burned inside me, I knew I had to take control of the situation. No one was going to dictate my worth, not even my own family. I confronted my husband the next morning. He was still groggy, still trying to avoid eye contact, and there was no remorse in his voice when he spoke. He tried to justify his actions, claiming that I had pushed him away and that we were drifting apart due to my work, my grief, my so-called fragile lifestyle. It was the same tired excuse they'd all used. Everyone except me was at fault. He wasn't the one who had failed. I was. "Are you seriously telling me this is my fault?" I asked, voice shaking but firm. "You cheated on me when I was going through one of the hardest moments of my life, and I'm the one who's to blame." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but he couldn't find the words. There was nothing he could say that would make it better. I'd caught him, and I had the proof. That was the moment I realized I deserved more. More than the betrayal, more than the gaslighting, and more than a family who couldn't even see my worth. I reached out to my best friend, the one my family thought would fit in my place. She was as shocked as I was by the suggestion, but in that moment, I realized something important. My best friend had always been there for me. She didn't just step in when times got tough. She'd been a constant source of support and love. She was the one who encouraged me to chase my dreams, who believed in me when no one else did. And that's exactly what I needed right now, someone who believed in me. Not as a wife, not as someone's backup plan, but as a person. I told my best friend everything what had happened with my husband, my family's shameful suggestion, and how I was feeling utterly defeated. She listened quietly, without judgment, and when I finished, she told me something I'll never forget. "You're worth so much more than this. You don't need anyone who doesn't see that." Her words were the final nudge I needed. It was clear to me now that I couldn't stay married to someone who treated me with such disrespect, someone who valued my worth only based on their own narrow views. I didn't deserve a husband who was cheating on me, nor did I need a family who would rather see me broken than support me through my grief. So I did what I had to do. I cut ties with everyone. The family who had so easily dismissed my grief, the husband who had betrayed me, and the people who thought they could replace me with my best friend. None of them deserved a place in my life anymore. I remember the moment I made the decision. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big confrontation, just a quiet, steady resolve that came over me. I realized I had been living in a toxic, suffocating environment, surrounded by people who didn't see my worth, let alone respect it. So I shut them all out. No calls, no texts, no social media. I just disappeared from their lives, and in doing so, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. But of course, when you take a stand like that, people don't just sit idly by. My family, especially my mother and sister, started calling incessantly. They left messages filled with confusion, frustration, and even anger. They couldn't fathom why I was cutting them out. My mom told me I was overreacting and being dramatic. She even accused me of ruining the family by not handling the situation like a mature adult. But what really took me by surprise was when my husband, who had been so quick to turn his back on me, actually tried to guilt-trip me into staying. He sent me a text that was almost laughable in its audacity. "You're destroying everything we've worked for," he wrote. "I never wanted this, and now you're throwing it all away." Throwing it all away. He was the one who threw everything away. He was the one who betrayed me, who chose an affair over his own wife during the hardest time of my life. He was the one who stood by as my family devalued me, only to join in with their cruel suggestions. And now he was playing the victim, as if I had wronged him somehow. But the real kicker came when I started the divorce proceedings. My family, having already given me the cold shoulder for months, was suddenly eager to help and fix things. They called again, begging me to reconsider, telling me how wrong it was to throw away a marriage of 6 years over something so trivial. My mom, in a phone call that I'll never forget, tried to make me feel guilty about the financial strain my divorce would put on them. "You'll be ruining your finances and making everything harder for all of us," she said. "Is this really what you want?" And let's not forget the husband, who, in one final act of hypocrisy, begged me not to go through with the divorce. He told me how much he regretted everything and how he didn't want to lose me, as if he hadn't already lost me the moment he started seeing someone else behind my back. As if his empty words could somehow erase the damage he'd done. But the most shocking thing was how they all seemed more concerned about money than about my well-being. My mom's phone call was followed by a text from my sister, asking how things would work with the house, implying that I would be breaking up the family's finances by leaving. No one asked if I was okay, if I needed help, or if I was even safe. They just wanted to know how this would affect them. It was a wake-up call. The people I thought were my support system were really only concerned with how they would be impacted by my decisions. And once I cut off all contact, once I started putting myself first, I realized just how little they had ever truly cared. But the financial support, well, that's where things got tricky. Once the divorce proceedings were in motion, my husband, who had always played the role of provider, suddenly shifted his tune. He claimed that the business I had built, the income I had earned, was community property and that he was entitled to a portion of it. He tried to leverage my hard work, my years of quiet dedication, to gain a financial advantage in the divorce settlement. It was a slap in the face, but here's the thing: they underestimated me. My business, my success, was never something I flaunted, but I had built it with my own hands. And once I consulted with a lawyer, it was clear that I didn't owe him a dime. I had every right to keep what was mine. The same couldn't be said for him, though. His affair and the betrayal he had shown me were hard to ignore in the eyes of the law, and my lawyer made sure the terms of our divorce reflected that. In the end, I walked away with what was rightfully mine: my business, my assets, and my peace of mind. I didn't just regain control of my finances, I reclaimed control of my life. And my family, well, they got the message. They stopped calling, they stopped texting. I was no longer the measly housewife they had assumed I was, and they couldn't handle that. So, while they may have wanted me to bend to their expectations, to live my life according to their script, I decided to write my own ending. I may have lost a lot, but I gained so much more: my peace, my independence, and the confidence to know that I can handle anything that comes my way.